Today we're going to learn to solve by factoring. Now if I showed this to you, that looks pretty familiar. But if I add an equal sign and a zero, and I tell you to solve for x, well, that's a different problem. Now, if I gave you this, and I said to solve for x, how would you do that? Well, one of these has to be zero, right? If I'm talking about the whole parentheses, not the x. If the whole parentheses is zero, then 0 times whatever is going to equal 0. So how do I get this x to equal 0? That is, how do I make that x a number that will make this parentheses equal 0? Well, what plus 4 equals 0? -4. Okay, -4 will make this parentheses equal 0. 4 plus -4 is 0. How do I make this parentheses equal 0? What plus -3 will equal 0? Well, 3 plus -3 equals 0. So if this is 0, I don't care what this is. And let's just run through that. If x is -4, this is going to be 0. But this parentheses is going to be -7. It doesn't matter. What's 0 times -7? It's 0. And if I make x equal 3, this will be 0, but this will be +7. Well, what's 0 times +7? Still 0. So you see how this works? We got to make not one of these parentheses, but each of these parentheses equal 0, because in these problems, most of the time, but not all the time, most of the time, you're going to have two answers. Now let's look at another problem that's a little bit more difficult. Okay, well, the first parentheses is a little difficult unless you got a pretty good math mind to figure out what x should be. And the second one is no better. So again, if you can look at that and figure out the answer, great. But if you can't, this is how you do that. Let's take down the first parentheses and make it equal 0. So 5x plus 1, well, we've done this before. Let's eliminate that one. So all that stuff you learned a while back is coming back, and you need that again. And let's bring all that down. Divide both sides by 5, remember that? And that isolates that x. And x equals -1/5. And you can put that negative out front if you like. I recommend that. So that's the solution for the first parentheses. Let's do the second parentheses. Same deal, take all the numbers in the parentheses and make it equal 0. And let's bring that -3 over to the other side. Bring all that down. Divide both sides by 2. Isolate the x. And x equals 3 over 2. X equals 3/2, whatever you want to call that. You can even convert that to a mixed number. If you convert that to a mixed number, it's 1/2, right? So what's our answer? X equals -1/5 and x equals 3/2. Now let me go through that as a check for you real quick. -1/5 times 5 is going to be what? -1. Hopefully you can do that in your head. -1 and 1 is 0. So we did our job here. Let's see. 2 times 3/2 is what? It's 3. +3. 3 minus 3 is 0. So we did our job here. Hopefully you can do that in your head. I'm not going to be going through all of these with you as a check. You should probably do that. Certainly on the test, you should test your work. You should check your work. But I'm just doing this right now to show you, to prove to you that that is the case. Now let's try another problem. Okay, they were giving us the binomials before, and now we have to produce the binomials, but we know how that works. 32, ooh, that's kind of a tricky number. Now hopefully that doesn't look too messy, but I took my 32 apart, and I've got 1 times 32, 2 times 16, 4 times 8. Those are our only possibilities. And I need to insert them into my binomials. Now I had a trinomial up here that equals 0. Now my two binomials are going to equal 0, just like the previous problems, except they'd done all the work for us, and now we have to do the work ourselves. So let's see. 1 minus 32, or I'm sorry, can I add or subtract 1 and 32 to get 4? I don't think so. Can I add or subtract 2 and 16 to get 4? I don't think so. Can I add or subtract 4 and 8 to get 4? Well, yeah. I can't add them, but if I subtract them, I'm going to get 4. Now, as we already know, we have a negative sign here, which means one of these is going to be positive and one's going to be negative. But anyways, let's get the numbers in there first. There you go. And like I said, one of them has to be negative because the 32 is negative. And what can I subtract, okay, to get positive 4? Well, 4 minus 8 is going to be negative 4. That doesn't work. 8 minus 4, oh, that works. So how about positive 8 minus 4? There you go. And that's our answer, right? No, we haven't solved for m yet. That's the question. Solve for m. So let's see. We have negative 4. M equals positive 4. Positive 4 minus 4 equals 0, so that's good. And I have positive 8, which means m is going to be negative 8. So look, negative 8 plus 8 is 0, so there's a good answer. Now, here's a good place to warn you. When we're trying to solve for m, we see that positive 8 and go, oh, the answer is positive 8 and negative 4. No, it's just the reverse. And I've already shown you why it needs to be the reverse, but don't fall into that trap as, oh, negative 4. The answer is negative 4. No, it's just the opposite of that. Obviously, to balance out this parentheses to make it equal 0. I know I'm repeating myself for about the third or fourth time. But there you go. That's the answer to this. And I'm going to give you one more problem. Okay, x squared equals 8x minus 15. I hope that doesn't look too difficult. And how do you think we're going to solve that? Hopefully the answer is pretty obvious. The right side of the equation needs to equal 0, right? Well, that being the case, I need to get 8x and negative 15 over here. So why don't we do that? Bring that down. Okay, and you can bring both of them over at the same time, but I didn't because I wanted to show you that you're going to have an 8x over here. Please don't divide by 8, because if I divide this by 8, I've got to divide that by 8 and that by 8. Is that going to isolate that x? No, our x's are not going to be isolated, so that's not going to work. And I'm not trying to isolate my x. So let's just bring 8x over and bring all that down. And I tell you what, when we bring all that down, could we put that in the proper order? There you go. That's what that should look like. And you know, some of you, not all of you, but you're going to be able to look at an equation like this and you're going to be able to see that that's x squared minus 8x plus 15 equals 0, and just be able to work with it that way. But in any event, let's take this. This is the end product, and let's factor that out into binomials. good, and let's tear that 15 apart. Can I add or subtract 1 and 15 to get to 8? I don't think so. Can I add or subtract 3 and 5 to get to 8? Yeah, I can add them together to get to 8, so let's do that. Okay, and let's figure out our signs. We have a positive 15, which means we have a positive 3 times a positive 5, or we have a negative 3 times a negative 5. Well, plus 3 and plus 5 does not equal negative 8. Negative 3 and negative 5 equals negative 8. What minus 3 equals 0? Yeah, positive 3 minus 3 equals 0, so that'll take care of that parentheses. And what minus 5 equals 0? That's right, 5. And 5 minus 5 equals 0, so that is the solution to this equation. X equals 3 or x equals 5. Now why don't we plug those answers into the original equation and see how that works out. Do you mind if I erase all this work? I didn't think you would. And so where the x's are in the original equation, let's put parentheses. Good, and those parentheses represent where the x should be, and don't forget that square there. And let's insert our first value for x. How about 3? And let's multiply all that out. Good, and does 9 equal 24 minus 15? It sure does, so that's a true statement. That works. And so let's substitute 5 in that parentheses. Good, and then let's multiply all that out. That's right, 5 squared is 25, and 8 times 5 is 40. And does 25 equal 40 minus 15? It sure does, so that's a good number too. And those are our two solutions. Now, some of you are going to want to do this kind of checking on all of your homework. That's good. I would recommend that you do checking on your homework just like this. Just, on 2, 3, or 4 problems. I would really recommend that because when you get to the test, I would definitely recommend that you check your answers on the test. Remember, a test is really important. Homework is to help you learn, but a test is really important. So when you get to the test, you don't want to be doing something new. You want to be doing something you've practiced, right? So practice this on a couple of your homework problems, and you will be good to go.